Alright, hello everybody. This is Aaron Troggy, and this is my presentation on food security in Fairbanks, Alaska. So, first thing to talk about is what is food security? And I kind of put 5 little key bullet points on what food security is based off my research. So, the first thing is there needs to be a sufficient amount of food. It needs to be safe, meaning that you're not going to be in harm's way getting the food. For most of us, this means going to the grocery store and not having to go put yourself in danger to, let's say, go hunting, although that is a very realistic way for us to get food in Alaska. Nutritious food, so not eating McDonald's. We're not going to count that as food security. It needs to be physically and economically accessible. So, we have grocery stores everywhere where we can get food instead of just having one in the middle of nowhere. And an economic access. So, is it affordable? Or is it limited to a certain class in a society? So, and it doesn't meet the daily dietary needs. Kind of goes with nutritious food. Making sure that we're not just eating junk food that's going to be harmful for us over time. So, when we're looking at Fairbanks and their food security, I actually found this to be really surprising, although I guess I should have known, but 95% of our food is imported. So, everything you see at the grocery store, for the most part, has been shipped in from out of state. And that's for a few reasons. So Alaska climate honestly just does not support farming. There are people that try to farm, and there's people that have their own gardens and stuff, but it is not efficient. It is very expensive. And there are technologies and research in place for making it more efficient. For instance, using the hoop house, which is on the bottom left, that photo there, or greenhouses, but it costs a lot of money to do that, and Alaska has a very short growing season. The summers are very short. They're extremely hot, and depending on where you are, Fairbanks, you get about 20 hours of sunlight in the summer each day, and you would think a lot of sunlight would be good for crops. Well, it can actually be pretty harmful for them as well. So you have to really know what you're doing if you're gardening, because too much sun, your crops will get sunburnt, and they'll stop growing when it gets too hot. And with the way the summers have been recently, getting up to the 100 degrees Fahrenheit, it takes a lot of education and time to make sure that you're going to be successful. And in the cold, dark winters, we have really long winters, so your time for growing is so short that it limits what you can grow. Some things just take too long, so the only way around that is to not grow it or to invest in greenhouses, which, like I said, is very expensive. Wanted to add something I found. So, food grown in-state is expensive due to the cost of inputs, inefficiencies, absence of economies of scale, and lack of competition. While imported food bears the transportation costs associated with the 3,000, 4,000 miles traveled between the producer and consumer. Approximately 10% of family income is spent on food in the United States, whereas the figure is closer to 14% in Alaska. So we're paying a fair amount more, and it's like this battle between, do we import food and pay that extra cost of shipping, or do we grow our own food and pay that extra cost of dealing with our climate and trying to produce here? And honestly, if you're buying Alaskan grown food, it's generally more expensive than the food that's shipped. So it's something to think about. It's pretty crazy how expensive food is. So another option, of course, is fish and game, and this is such an abundant resource for people in Alaska. But the problem is this only helps fill the gap. This does not solve the food security issue that Fairbanks has. Now, hunting licenses being sold has been increasing, and I would imagine it has to do with food prices. 105,000 were sold. But the problem with this is not always a guarantee. And in this generation, not everyone knows how to hunt. I was fortunate enough to be raised in a family where I know how to hunt, and I enjoy hunting. I went hunting last year, and I was not successful. So that's, I had to spend some money for a moose tag, and then I was unsuccessful. So there was a time investment, a money investment, and then there was no gain outside of the experience. So this is not necessarily a solution. It's just something that helps fill the gap. And of course, Alaskans can always put in for a free hunting tag each year, but it's a raffle, so that's also not a guarantee. And then, of course, there's fishing. Alaskans are allowed to dip net for salmon. So really what that requires is access to the rivers, and also costs money generally if you take the charter in Chitina, or if you're just able to hike out, you can save some money, but definitely much more difficult. So the gaps and the root cause. Honestly, I would say that the root cause is simply our terrain. Some people might say that it's the fact that we have to ship everything and that's expensive, but I would argue that the root cause of why we have to ship everything is because we just do not live in a climate that is successful in this day and age for farming, and quite limited for hunting. And I say that because, Alaskans, Alaskan natives, originally before westernization came through, everything they did was hunting and gathering. But now they have to rely on motored vehicles, and that costs fuel and resources, which means they also have to have jobs. So we're at this time where it's really hard to just live off the land. It's something that not a lot of people really do anymore. There are communities that still do it, but it's definitely a dying breed of people. It seems like most people nowadays just goes to the grocery store. They go get fast food, and that's where their food comes from. And it's really unhealthy. It's really unfortunate. I think a lot of people just don't even realize how unhealthy a lot of the food we get is. So, I hope there's better education out there for people. And I'm out of time. So, but we need to improve our infrastructure for farming, for what there is, because I think it is a great way to go. And also improve policies that support local farming. So, thank you everyone for listening to my food security in Fairbanks, Alaska.